A boy helps an elderly man carry a heavy sofa up the stairs, expecting nothing in return. The next day, the elderly man shows up at his house with an envelope and a story that brings him to tears. Ethan walked home from school under the warm afternoon sun. He was 14 years old, thin, and wore a school uniform that had faded over time. His backpack looked old with its straps frayed along the edges. Then he moved slowly along the sidewalk in a quiet neighborhood in Asheville, North Carolina. The houses around him were small and simple, with chipped paint and worn steps. The scent of jasmine drifted through the air, but he barely noticed it. He was tired from a long day and knew that once he reached home, more responsibilities would be waiting for him. Ethan lived with his mother and younger brother, Leo. His mother worked as a cashier at a local supermarket, standing for many hours each day. She earned little money, and it was never enough to cover all their expenses. Ethan often saw her return home with tired eyes and tense shoulders. His younger brother, Leo, was 9 years old. After school, it was Ethan's duty to look after Leo until their mother came back from work in the evening. Their house was small and in need of repairs. The walls were dull, and the windows rattled when a strong wind blew. They could not afford fresh paint or better furniture. There were always unpaid bills on the kitchen table. Ethan often saw final notices from the electric company or the landlord. He did not know how his mother managed, but he knew each month was a struggle. He tried not to complain, understanding that his mother did her best and wanting to help in any way he could. That day, Ethan had stayed after school to help the librarian organize old books. He did not get paid for the work, but he hoped it might help him later if he applied for small jobs around the neighborhood. He also liked the quiet atmosphere of the library, which felt calm compared to the stress at home, where they never knew if the next bill would lead to something being cut off. He wanted to show that he was responsible, hoping it would open doors for him in the future. As Ethan turned onto his street, he noticed the grass in their yard was uneven. He had tried to cut it with an old mower, but it often jammed. The neighbors seldom greeted him. Some looked at him with quiet judgment, as if they expected nothing good from him. He felt certain people thought he would never escape the cycle of poverty around him. This feeling was unspoken, but he sensed it in their glances. He reached the front door and stepped inside. The house felt warm and stale. They could not afford to run the air conditioner for long periods. Inside the refrigerator, there were only a few eggs, a small carton of milk, and some leftovers. Ethan sighed and closed the fridge. He found Leo sitting on the couch with his schoolwork spread out on the coffee table. Leo greeted him and asked for help with a simple math worksheet. Ethan sat down next to him, guiding him through it and trying to keep his mind off their financial problems. Later, as Ethan walked into the small kitchen, he saw the final notice from the electric company. It warned that the electricity would be cut off if payment was not made soon. He remembered his mother's worried face from the previous night. She had tried to rearrange their budget, but there was never enough money. Ethan wondered how long they could hold on. Even though he was only 14, Ethan felt a heavy sense of responsibility. His father had left them 3 years ago without explanation. One day, he was there, and the next, he was gone. There were no phone calls, no letters, no help. Ethan had tried to understand why, but he never found an answer. His father's absence forced him to become more mature at a young age. He felt he had to be strong for his mother and brother, though he was unsure if he was doing enough. When their mother came home, she looked tired as usual. She spoke little, only asking if they had eaten and if Leo had finished his homework. Ethan told her about the final notice. She nodded without surprise, sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a calculator, and tried to make sense of their bills. Ethan stood beside her quietly. He could see the numbers and knew they did not add up. He placed a hand on her shoulder briefly, hoping to offer some comfort, even though he had no real solution. That night, Ethan lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling. He thought about the future. Would they lose electricity tomorrow? How would they manage then? He tried to remain calm and tell himself that somehow they would get by. He remembered a time before his father left, when the fridge was full and the bills were paid on time. Those days felt distant now. He tried not to feel angry or abandoned, but it was hard. Ethan wanted to do something helpful, but he had no clear idea what that could be. He was too young to get a job that paid enough to make a difference. All he could do was keep working hard at school and hope that someday he would find a way out of this situation. He finally closed his eyes and listened to the soft sounds of the neighborhood outside. Life was not easy, but he would keep moving forward, step by step, day by day. Early the next morning, Ethan rose from his bed. He washed his face with cold water to save on hot water. He dressed in his old uniform and had a small breakfast of cereal with water instead of milk. They had to stretch their food supplies as far as possible. His mother was still asleep, and Leo was still under the blankets. Ethan left quietly, giving them a few moments of rest before their long day began. He walked down the sidewalk toward his school, passing the same familiar houses. He wondered if today would be the day they lost electricity. He tried not to think about it, but it was always in the back of his mind. As he approached the school, he saw other students arriving. Some had newer clothes and bigger backpacks. Ethan kept his head down and focused on his own goals, even if he did not know exactly what those goals were yet. In class, Ethan listened to the teacher and took notes. He forced himself to pay attention, thinking that education might be his only way to improve his life. He tried not to worry about the bills at home. The teacher discussed a topic in social studies, and Ethan wrote down key points. He wanted to do well, even though he sometimes doubted that good grades alone would help him escape his circumstances. At lunchtime, Ethan sat alone. He had a simple sandwich and some water. He looked around at other students who bought hot meals in the cafeteria. He did not feel sorry for himself, but he recognized the differences. They seemed more relaxed, talking about summer plans or sports activities. He ate quietly and then went to the library to avoid wasting time. In the library, Ethan organized books again. He enjoyed the quiet and the sense of order. The librarian thanked him for his help and he nodded politely. Although he earned no money, he hoped someone would remember his willingness to work. Maybe later, he could find a small job. He wanted to do something to help his family. Even a little money might pay for a bill or some groceries. After school, Ethan walked home under a warm sun. His steps were slow, and he wondered if the electricity would still be on. He also wondered if there was something small he could do to help his mother. Most places would not hire someone his age, and many neighbors were also struggling. He needed a different approach, but he had no idea what that would be. As he passed through the neighborhood, he noticed a few people sitting on their porches. They saw him but did not greet him. He felt their quiet judgment again. He tried to ignore it and reminded himself that what others thought did not matter. He only wanted to help his family and stay on a good path. When Ethan arrived home, he saw that the lights still worked. He felt a bit relieved, even though it might only be temporary. He went to the kitchen, checked the fridge, and found some leftover rice and vegetables. He heated them on the stove for Leo, who would be home soon. He always tried to make sure Leo had something to eat after school. Leo arrived and dropped his backpack by the door. He ate quickly and told Ethan about his day, which was uneventful. Ethan listened carefully, nodding at the right moments. After Leo finished eating, Ethan helped him with his homework. This time, it was a reading assignment. Leo stumbled over a few words and Ethan took his time to help him. Their mother came home later, looking worn out from standing all day at the supermarket. She shook her head, and Ethan understood that she had not found a solution to the electric bill. They spent a quiet evening as the sun went down. Ethan tried not to bring up the bills, not wanting to add more stress. That night, after everyone was in bed, Ethan lay awake again. He thought about ways to improve their situation. Maybe he could mow lawns or wash cars, but he would need reliable equipment. Maybe he could tutor someone, but who would pay for that service? He felt stuck. He turned on his side, telling himself that he would try to be alert for any chance that appeared. He had no idea that tomorrow, on his way home, he would hear someone struggling with a heavy piece of furniture. He did not know that this small decision to help would set events in motion. For now, he just tried to rest, hoping that he could find a way to bring some relief to his family's situation. Ethan woke up and noticed that the electricity was still on. He felt relief wash over him, even though he knew it might not last. He dressed, ate a small breakfast of toast and water, and walked to school. It was a normal day with lessons he tried to focus on, and classmates who mostly ignored him. At lunchtime, he had a small sandwich. Again, he followed the same routine as before, spending a few minutes helping in the library after school. By the time classes ended, he felt tired, but he knew he had to head straight home to take care of Leo. The weather was warm and dry that afternoon as he made his way back. As he passed by a house he knew belonged to an older man named Mr. Harris, he heard strained grunts and the scraping sound of something heavy. Ethan paused and looked toward the open doorway of the old man's home. He saw Mr. Harris, a thin, gray-haired man who lived alone, struggling to lift one end of a large sofa on the narrow staircase inside his house. The old man seemed determined, but he was clearly having trouble managing the weight. Ethan stood there for a moment, considering the situation. He had his own worries at home, but this man looked like he needed help right now. Without hesitation, Ethan walked closer and asked politely, "Do you need a hand, sir?" Mr. Harris looked surprised but relieved. "I'm trying to carry this sofa upstairs," he said, catching his breath. "I need to rearrange some rooms, but it's heavier than I expected." Ethan did not ask questions. He set down his backpack, rolled up his sleeves, and lifted the other end of the sofa. The two of them maneuvered it carefully up the first few steps. It was hard work. Ethan's arms strained as they climbed one step at a time. The staircase was narrow, and they had to tilt the sofa to fit through. Mr. Harris guided from above, and Ethan pushed from below, making sure not to lose his grip. It took several minutes of effort. Both of them had to pause a few times to catch their breath. Ethan felt sweat forming on his forehead. He focused on the task, grateful that he could use his strength to help. Eventually, they reached the second floor. They placed the sofa along a wall in a spare room. Mr. Harris wiped his brow and smiled, pleased that it was done. "Thank you," the old man said. "I appreciate your help. That was not something I could have finished alone." Ethan nodded. "It's no problem," he said. He looked around the room. It was simple, with old furniture and family photos. He did not want to be rude, so he just smiled politely. He did not expect anything in return. He wanted to go home to make sure Leo was all right and to see if his mother had found any temporary solution for their bills. As Ethan picked up his backpack and headed toward the door, Mr. Harris followed him. "I'm glad you passed by," Mr. Harris said. "Not many people stop to help these days." Ethan nodded again and said goodbye. He left the house and continued his walk home. He felt a small sense of satisfaction from having done something useful. Despite all his family's troubles, he had managed to help someone today. When he arrived home, he found Leo reading a book on the couch. There were no new surprises that afternoon. The electricity was still running, and his mother was not home yet. Ethan heated leftover rice and gave Leo a small snack. Leo told him about his day at school, which had been normal and uneventful. Ethan listened carefully and helped Leo with a bit of homework before their mother returned that evening. Their mother looked worried, as always, but she did not mention any new problems. She reviewed their bills as usual and sighed quietly at the kitchen table. Ethan wished he had a solution for her, but he did not. He only told her that he had helped an old man carry a piece of furniture. She nodded and gave a small smile, happy that her son had been kind to someone. They ate a light meal and went to bed early. Ethan lay awake thinking about Mr. Harris. He wondered why the old man needed to rearrange his house. Maybe he just wanted more space, or maybe there was some special reason. Ethan drifted off to sleep, not knowing that the next day would bring a surprise that would change their situation in a way he had never expected. The next morning, Ethan woke up and noticed that nothing seemed different. He had the same small breakfast, and the house felt as it always did. He left for school, wondering if today would be the day the electricity went off, but when he flipped the light switch on his way out, it still worked. He walked through the neighborhood, head down, thinking about how his family would pay the bills. The school day passed without incident. He listened to lessons, took notes, ate his usual simple lunch, and helped in the library. Again, after school, he walked home carrying the same worn backpack. As he turned onto his street, he saw something unusual. A large, expensive car parked in front of his modest house. It was a sleek, dark vehicle with tinted windows, completely out of place among the older cars and simple homes. Ethan approached carefully, unsure of what to expect. A man in a suit stood on the sidewalk holding an envelope. He was middle-aged with neat hair and polished shoes. He noticed Ethan and stepped forward with a polite smile. "Excuse me," the man said. "Are you Ethan?" Ethan felt a slight fear rising inside him. Who was this stranger? He nodded quietly. The man's smile widened. "My name is Robert Harris," he said. "My father is Mr. Harris, who you helped yesterday with the sofa. He spoke very highly of you." Ethan felt surprised. He had not expected any follow-up from that moment of help. He wondered if something was wrong. Robert Harris extended the envelope toward him. "My father asked me to give you this," he said. Ethan hesitated. He did not understand what was happening. He looked at the envelope. "What is this?" he asked softly. "It is a small token of gratitude," Robert Harris said. "My father was moved by your kindness. He said you asked for nothing in return. He wanted to thank you in a meaningful way." Ethan took the envelope slowly. He did not open it yet. "Thank you," he said quietly. Robert nodded. "There is also a letter inside," he said. "I hope it will explain things." With that, Robert stepped back, returned to the car, and drove away. Ethan watched him go, still confused and holding the envelope tightly. He entered his house and found his mother sitting at the kitchen table. She looked at the envelope and at Ethan's puzzled expression. Leo was on the couch, interested but not fully understanding. Ethan explained what had happened. His mother frowned. She asked Ethan to open the envelope. Inside, they found a folded letter and a surprising amount of money. Ethan's mother gasped and looked at her son with wide eyes. Leo also approached, trying to see what was going on. Ethan read the letter quietly. First, it thanked him for helping Mr. Harris and taking the time to assist without expecting anything in return. The letter mentioned that Mr. Harris had recently decided to reorganize his home, which had been a painful task after losing his wife. The letter expressed deep appreciation and said the enclosed money was intended to help Ethan's family with expenses or education. Ethan's mother looked worried. "Why would someone give us money like this?" she asked. She seemed suspicious, fearing they might be tricked. Ethan understood her concern. It was unusual for strangers to appear and hand out money, especially in a neighborhood like theirs. Ethan tried to think it through. He remembered Mr. Miley Harris's gratitude and the effort it took to carry that sofa. He did not sense any dishonesty in the old man. Still, the situation felt strange. Ethan's mother paced the small living room, unsure what to do. Leo looked excited, but he did not fully grasp the implications. That evening, the three of them discussed it at length. Ethan's mother worried that accepting the money might make them look weak, or that there could be hidden conditions. She wondered if the man would come back asking for favors. Ethan considered returning the envelope. He did not want to cause trouble, but at the same time, the stack of bills on the table and the final notice from the electric company were very real. The money could help them pay off immediate debts and stabilize their household. It could buy food and keep the lights on. It could provide better study materials for him and Leo. Ethan's mother said they should think carefully before making a decision. They went to bed that night, still uncertain. Ethan lay awake again, thinking about Mr. Harris and the letter. The man's words seemed honest. He had done a simple good deed and now was offered kindness in return. Yet Ethan understood his mother's fear. Life had taught them to be careful. Ethan promised himself that he would try to understand the situation better. Maybe he should visit Mr. Harris, thank him in person, and see if there was any explanation that would put their worries to rest. For now, he would keep the envelope safe. He understood that a moment like this might not come again. It could be their best chance to improve their conditions, but he had to be sure it was right. Tomorrow would bring new thoughts and possibly new challenges. For the moment, all he could do was sleep and hope he would find the right answer. The next morning, Ethan woke up early and sat at the kitchen table. His mother had already left for work, and Leo was still asleep. He ate a small bowl of cereal and water, thinking about the envelope and the money inside it. He understood why his mother worried. Accepting help from strangers could lead to misunderstandings, and they had learned to be cautious after so many disappointments in life. Ethan decided that he would try to speak with Mr. Harris. He wanted to understand the old man's intentions better. He felt that if he knew more about why Mr. Harris gave them this money, it would help his mother feel more comfortable. He did not think the old man meant any harm. Mr. Harris had seemed sincere, but Ethan needed more information. After finishing his cereal, Ethan washed his bowl, got dressed, and walked to school. He tried to focus on his classes, but his mind drifted to the envelope at home. He took careful notes in class and listened to the teacher, but he found it hard to pay attention. At lunchtime, he ate a small sandwich and quietly thought about what he would say to Mr. Harris. He decided to be honest. He would thank him for his kindness and explain the family's worries. He would ask why Mr. Harris had decided to give such a large sum of money. In the afternoon, Ethan went to the library to help the librarian as usual. This time, he felt distracted. He placed books on shelves and organized them by category, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The librarian noticed he was quieter than usual, but she did not ask questions. Ethan appreciated that. He preferred to keep his family issues private. When school ended, Ethan walked straight toward Mr. Harris's home. The old man's house was on the way to Ethan's, so it was not out of the way. He remembered which home it was, because that was where he had helped move the heavy sofa. When he arrived, he stood at the front door and knocked softly. He did not know if Mr. Harris would remember him. It had been only a couple of days, but the old man might be resting or not expecting visitors. After a short wait, Mr. Harris opened the door. He looked surprised but pleased to see Ethan. He invited the boy inside with a gentle smile. Ethan stepped into the same room where they had carried the sofa. He noticed that Mr. Harris had rearranged other pieces of furniture as well. The space looked organized and neat. Mr. Harris offered Ethan a seat. Ethan sat down and held his hands in his lap, feeling a bit nervous. He cleared his throat and began. "Sir, thank you for what you did. Your son came by and gave my family an envelope. It had a letter and some money in it. We appreciate your kindness, but my mother is worried. She does not understand why someone would help us like that. She thinks there might be a catch. Mr. Harris listened carefully. He nodded, understanding that this was a delicate matter. He looked at Ethan calmly. "I understand your mother's concern," he said. "It is not common for someone to give money without asking for something in return. But I assure you, I mean no harm. You helped me when I needed it, and I wanted to repay you in a way that mattered." Ethan took a breath and tried to choose his words carefully. "I believe you mean well," he said, "but can you explain why this means so much to you? I want to help my mother understand." Mr. Harris looked away for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. "The sofa you helped me carry," he said slowly, "was very important to me. I am an old man, and I have lost many things in my life. I lost my wife not very long ago. That sofa was where she spent her last days. It holds many memories. I wanted to move it upstairs to a quiet room where I could sit and remember her. Your help made that possible." Ethan listened, feeling a weight in his chest. He had not expected such a personal reason. He understood now that his simple act had touched something deep inside Mr. Harris. Still, he wanted to be sure about the money. Mr. Harris continued, "My son and I discussed how we could thank you. We know life is not easy for everyone. We know that sometimes a small push can change someone's path. We wanted to give you something that would make a difference, because what you did for me meant more than words can say. There is no trick, no hidden cost. I am an old man who wanted to show gratitude in a meaningful way." Ethan nodded. He understood now. He could see that Mr. Harris felt genuine appreciation. Still, he knew his mother would need reassurance. "I will explain this to my mother," Ethan said. "She is careful because we have had hard times. I think if she hears why this was important to you, she will understand." Mr. Harris smiled. "Feel free to bring your mother to meet me if she wants. I would be happy to speak with her and put her mind at ease. I know what it's like to face distrust and difficulty. I only hope this small gift can help you and your family." Ethan thanked Mr. Harris and stood up to leave. He felt calmer now. He believed Mr. Harris was sincere. He walked home with a lighter step. His mind was clearer, and he looked forward to talking to his mother later that evening. At home, Ethan found his mother already there. Leo was doing homework at the kitchen table. Ethan explained what Mr. Harris had told him. He described how the sofa reminded Mr. Harris of his late wife and how their help had moved him to return the kindness. His mother listened quietly. She did not speak for a few moments after Ethan finished. Finally, she nodded. "If this is true and he is sincere, then maybe we should accept the help," she said. "But we must use the money wisely. We should pay the bills and buy what we need, not waste anything." Ethan agreed. He felt relief wash over him. It seemed they were taking a step in the right direction. The money might help them stabilize their home situation, at least for a while. They could pay the electric bill and buy enough groceries to fill the fridge. They could also get Leo and Ethan better supplies for school. This would not solve all their problems, but it would give some breathing room. That night, Ethan slept a little better. He knew his family was still poor, and many challenges remained. But at least now they had a chance to move forward without losing their electricity or going hungry. He thought of Mr. Harris and was grateful for his understanding and generosity. Ethan reminded himself that helping others and accepting help in return could sometimes open new paths. The following day, Ethan woke up feeling more hopeful. He ate a simple breakfast, this time with a small portion of milk in his cereal because they had bought some the night before. After deciding to accept the money, it felt good to have a bit more food in the house. He headed to school with a calm mind, knowing that at least for now, their basic needs would be met. In class, Ethan paid closer attention. He realized that having fewer immediate worries helped him focus. He answered a few questions the teacher asked, and she nodded approvingly. At lunchtime, He brought a slightly better lunch than usual, a sandwich with some fresh vegetables. He ate slowly, appreciating the change. After school, Ethan did his usual library task, then walked home. He noticed that the tension in the neighborhood seemed unchanged. People still looked at him quietly, but he cared less about their opinions now. He was more focused on his own life and on making things better for his family. When he arrived home, he found his mother waiting for him. She had taken a short break from work to meet with Mr. Harris. She wanted to hear his story and confirm what Ethan had told her. She asked Ethan to go with her, while Leo stayed home for a short while reading a book. Ethan agreed, understanding that his mother needed this meeting to trust Mr. Harris's intentions. They walked together along the familiar path to Mr. Harris's house. The sun was still bright and the air was warm. When they reached the old man's home, Ethan knocked on the door. Mr. Harris opened it and greeted them politely, inviting them inside. Ethan's mother introduced herself, speaking calmly. She thanked Mr. Harris for his kind gesture and explained that she wanted to understand his reasons personally. Mr. Harris nodded and asked them to sit down. He repeated the same story he had told Ethan, explaining how his wife had passed away in that very house, how the sofa held memories of her, and how moving it upstairs was not just a physical task, but an emotional one. He said Ethan's willingness to help without asking for anything in return reminded him that good still existed in the world. Ethan's mother listened carefully, watching Mr. Harris's face and posture. She saw no sign of dishonesty. When he finished, she thanked him again, saying that it was not easy for them to accept help, but they would do so to improve their situation. She promised to use the money wisely for the family's needs. Mr. Harris looked pleased and said he was happy they understood his intentions. He did not expect anything in return. He only wanted them to have a chance to move forward. After a brief conversation, Ethan and his mother thanked Mr. Harris and left. Outside, Ethan's mother seemed more relaxed. She said she believed Mr. Harris's story and intentions were genuine. She admitted that accepting help felt strange, but in this case, it seemed like the right thing to do. With the money, the family quickly paid the overdue electric bill. Ethan felt relief when he saw the receipt. They bought groceries, fresh produce, and enough basic supplies to last for a while. His mother also purchased some notebooks, pencils, and other school materials for Ethan and Leo. These were small improvements, but they made life easier. Over the next few days, Ethan noticed changes. With the bills paid, his mother seemed less worried. She still worked hard at the supermarket, but now her eyes did not look as tired when she came home. They had regular meals, and the house felt more stable. Ethan also focused more on his studies. He knew that education was his best path forward, and now he had the tools to study properly. Leo was happy to have better school supplies. He did his homework more willingly, and Ethan helped him read books borrowed from the library. The younger boy did not fully understand the complexity of the situation, but he liked the fact that the lights stayed on and the fridge had food. Ethan also visited Mr. Harris again, this time just to say thank you and let him know how they were doing. Mr. Harris smiled, pleased to see the positive outcome of his gift. They spoke briefly about books, school, and work. Mr. Harris encouraged Ethan to keep studying and to think about his future. He said that young people had opportunities he never had and hoped Ethan would use them well. As the days passed, the community noticed small changes in Ethan's family, even if they did not know the full story. Some neighbors saw that the family had fewer troubles with their bills and that the boys had better supplies. They did not ask questions, but paid more attention. Ethan's mother held her head a bit higher, feeling proud that they were on more solid ground, even if just for a short time. Ethan understood that their struggles were not over. They still had to deal with low income and the many challenges of their neighborhood. But at least now they had a bit of relief. They could plan ahead instead of constantly reacting to emergencies. Ethan believed that this was the start of something better. It might not be a dramatic change, but it gave him hope. He also learned that helping someone could create unexpected benefits. His simple act of kindness had led to this moment. It showed him that good deeds could make a difference. Accepting help when given honestly was not a sign of weakness. It was a chance to move forward. Ethan prepared for another school day, placing new pencils and notebooks in his old backpack. He would make the most of them. He thought about the future, about studying harder, and about maybe getting a scholarship one day. He knew it would not be easy, but now he had a reason to believe it might be possible. In the days that followed, Ethan and his family adjusted to their improved situation. Their home still looked simple and warm, but now it had enough basic supplies. The electric bill was paid, the refrigerator had fresh food, and there were a few new notebooks and pencils on the kitchen table. Ethan's mother seemed less stressed when she returned from work. She still had a hard job, and their income was low, but at least they were not constantly on the edge of losing basic services. Ethan sat at the kitchen table after school, reviewing his notes. He liked the feeling of writing in a clean notebook with a proper pencil. It helped him stay organized, and he noticed that he understood his lessons better when he had the right tools. Leo finished his homework nearby, using new crayons for a school project. The younger boy hummed quietly, pleased with his colorful drawings. Their mother watched them for a moment before starting dinner. She seemed satisfied that her children had what they needed. However, Ethan still felt a trace of doubt. He knew they had accepted help from Mr. Harris, and that this help came from a good place. He understood that the old man wanted nothing in return. Still, Ethan worried about how others might see it. He remembered the quiet judgment from some neighbors who expected nothing positive from someone like him. Every time he thought about it, he remembered Mr. Harris's sincere words and kind smile. Ethan told himself that using this money wisely was the best way to honor the old man's gift. He did not have to prove anything to the neighbors. He just had to stay focused on improving his life. He looked at Leo, who was happily coloring a simple landscape. Ethan knew that a better environment would help both of them learn and grow. He decided not to let fear of judgment stop him from moving forward. At school the next day, Ethan paid close attention to the teacher's explanations. He took notes neatly, and when the teacher asked a question, he raised his hand and answered confidently. Some students seemed surprised. Ethan had always been quiet, but now he had a calm assurance. He realized that he no longer felt the same level of stress that had weighed on him before. He still had responsibilities at home, but at least he knew they would have dinner on the table and the lights would remain on. This allowed him to give more energy to his studies. During lunchtime, Ethan ate a simple sandwich and fruit. It was more nutritious than before, and he noticed he had more energy in the afternoon. He did not seek attention or try to brag about his improved situation. He simply went about his day focused on learning. He hoped that good grades and knowledge would open doors for him later in life. After school, Ethan returned to the library to help the librarian. He organized books and placed them in the correct order. The librarian thanked him and noticed that Ethan seemed more settled. She asked if everything was all right, and he just smiled and said things were better at home. She wished him well and told him that his willingness to help was appreciated. Ethan felt good hearing those words. It reminded him that being kind and helpful was never a waste of effort. On his way home, Ethan passed by Mr. Harris's house. He thought about stopping in to say hello, but did not want to intrude too often. Instead, he paused for a second on the sidewalk, remembering their conversation. He told himself he would visit in a few days to let Mr. Harris know how they were using the gift. For now, He wanted to focus on showing good results both at school and at home. When Ethan arrived home, his mother asked about his day. He told her about answering questions in class and feeling more confident. She seemed pleased and encouraged him to keep studying and to use the supplies they had bought wisely. She also reminded him that this opportunity, as helpful as it was, did not solve all their long-term problems. They still needed to be careful with money and work hard. Ethan understood. He knew the money was not endless, and they had to use it to build a more stable life, not to relax or waste resources. That evening, as they ate dinner together, the atmosphere felt calmer. The small kitchen still looked old, and the chairs wobbled slightly, but they had a decent meal. Leo chattered about a reading assignment, and Ethan listened patiently. Their mother leaned back in her chair, probably tired from work, but at least she wasn't worried about immediate threats like losing electricity. Ethan spent the rest of the evening reviewing school notes and helping Leo with his reading practice. He saw improvements in both himself and his brother. Leo read with slightly more confidence, and Ethan noticed that his own understanding of certain subjects was deepening. He hoped that if he kept working hard, he might qualify for a program or scholarship one day. He had no guarantee, but at least now he felt prepared to try. Before going to sleep, Ethan thought about how far they had come. Just a short time ago, they were on the edge of losing power with almost nothing in the fridge. Now, they had some breathing room. They were still poor, still living in a modest home, and still facing his mother's low-paying job, but they had a start. They had a moment of stability that could lead to better things if they acted wisely. Ethan closed his eyes and rested, determined to keep moving forward. The next morning, Ethan walked to school feeling a quiet determination. The sun was out and the weather was warm. He wore his old uniform, but it was clean, and he carried his improved school supplies. He didn't care if anyone noticed the changes. He was focused on using his time well. In class, Ethan participated more than before. He asked the teacher questions when he did not understand something. He wrote down detailed notes, planning to review them at home. He felt a sense of purpose that he had not felt before. He wanted to make the most of this opportunity and show that he could rise above the low expectations some people had of him. During lunchtime, he sat at the same table but felt more at ease. He read over his notes, making sure he understood the lessons. He knew that good grades could help him later, maybe even help him find better opportunities to earn money or get into a program that would support his education. He still had doubts and fears, but at least now he had the tools to try harder. After school, he decided to stop by Mr. Harris's home. When he knocked on the door, Mr. Harris greeted him warmly. Ethan thanked him again and explained how his family had used the money to stabilize their situation. He told Mr. Harris about paying the electric bill, buying food, and getting school supplies. He said that he felt more confident at school and that his brother Leo also benefited from better materials. Mr. Harris listened with a pleased expression. He said he was glad the help had made a real difference. He told Ethan that life could be hard and that sometimes people needed a helping hand. He encouraged Ethan to keep studying and to believe in himself. He reminded Ethan that he had good character and that character would guide him through hard times. Ethan appreciated Mr. Harris's encouragement. He understood that the old man's kindness was sincere. He also learned a lesson about helping and receiving help. It did not make him weak to accept assistance when it was offered honestly. Instead, it gave him a chance to stand on firmer ground and try for better opportunities. In the following days, Ethan noticed small positive changes. His mother seemed slightly less anxious. She still worked long hours, but she did not have to worry about losing basic services that month. She could even think about saving a little for the future. Leo studied more willingly, enjoying his new pencils and crayons. Even neighbors, though still quiet, watched the family with curious eyes, seeing that they were managing a bit better than before. Ethan did not try to explain the situation to anyone. He knew rumors would spread anyway, but he did not care. He focused on what mattered most, improving their lives step by step. He worked harder at school, hoping that good results would lead to more opportunities. He made sure to use the money wisely, spending only on what they needed. At home, he sometimes caught his mother smiling softly as she arranged groceries in the fridge or sorted through bills that were now paid on time. She told Ethan how proud she was of him for being responsible and caring. She thanked him for understanding the importance of education. Ethan felt proud too. He knew they still faced many challenges, but now they had a path that was slightly clearer. One afternoon, Ethan spent time reading a borrowed book from the school library. It was about different careers and skills that could help young people. He considered the possibilities, thinking about what he might do in the future. It would be a long road, and he had no guarantees, but he felt he had a real chance now, something he could not have imagined before. He also kept in mind that this help would not last forever. The money Mr. Harris had given them would not solve all their problems. It was not a permanent solution. They would need to continue working, saving, and planning, but at least it opened the door for them to break free from the constant crisis mode they had been in. As the evening approached, Ethan helped his mother prepare a simple meal. He set the table, feeling grateful for what they had. They ate quietly, talking about Leo's schoolwork and Ethan's classes. After dinner, Ethan and Leo read together. The electric light shone steadily, and Ethan remembered the fear he had felt before when he thought the lights might go out at any moment. Now he could focus on the words on a page instead of worrying. Before going to bed, Ethan reviewed his notes again. He wanted to do well on an upcoming test. He understood that doing his best at school was not just about getting good grades, it was about building a future. He would not forget the kindness that had helped make this possible, and he knew that one day he might help someone else in need, just as he had helped Mr. Harris move that sofa. It was a quiet end to the day, and Ethan felt calm. He had no illusions that life would suddenly become easy, but he finally understood that accepting help, using it wisely, and remaining determined could change their path. Over the next few weeks, Ethan continued to focus on his studies. With their household more stable, he no longer felt the constant pressure of unpaid bills and empty cabinets. He did not take their improved conditions for granted. Instead, he used this new stability to work harder at school. He still had his usual responsibilities at home, but he managed them with greater confidence. When Ethan arrived at school each day, he felt more prepared. He answered questions in class when he felt sure of his response. He stayed focused on the material, took careful notes, and reviewed them in the evenings. His mother often asked him about his day and listened closely when he described the lessons. Leo also seemed more interested in school, following Ethan's example. The younger boy proudly showed his improved handwriting and neater drawings, pleased to have good materials to use. The neighbors still watched quietly, but now some offered a nod or a brief greeting when Ethan passed by. They noticed that the family did not seem as anxious or desperate. Ethan's mother continued to work at the supermarket, but with bills paid, she no longer carried the same heavy burden. She saved a bit of money whenever possible, hoping to build a small cushion for the future. It was not easy, and they were still poor, but at least now they had a plan. Ethan kept in touch with Mr. Harris, stopping by occasionally to say hello. He did not want to intrude too often, but Mr. Harris always welcomed him. The old man asked about school and smiled when Ethan reported steady progress. Ethan mentioned that he was reading more books, including some about subjects that interested him, like history and science. Mr. Harris approved, saying that knowledge would help Ethan make informed choices as he grew older. Mr. Harris never asked for anything in return. He simply encouraged Ethan to keep going and to remember that setbacks were normal. He said it was important not to give up when things got hard. Ethan understood this more deeply now. He realized that the help they had received had given them a chance, but it was up to them to make the most of it. One afternoon after school, Ethan helped Leo with a reading assignment. He noticed that Leo seemed more confident, sounding out words carefully and sometimes asking thoughtful questions. Ethan remembered how not long ago their main concern was whether they would have lights to do homework by. Now they had a stable environment, and Leo could focus on learning rather than worrying about their basic needs. As Ethan studied in the evenings, he thought about the future. He did not know exactly what he wanted to do yet, but he felt motivated to improve himself. He might consider applying for a program that offered extra classes or scholarships for students in need. He might explore skills that could lead to a stable job one day. He understood that it would take time and effort, but he had faith that small steps added up. Ethan's mother continued to remind him that the money Mr. Harris gave them would not last forever. It was not a permanent solution. They still had to be careful. But instead of feeling anxious, Ethan took this as a reason to keep pushing forward. He saw their temporary stability as a starting point. If he could use this period of calm to excel academically, he might earn opportunities that would help them later. In the neighborhood, people began to see Ethan differently. He did not boast or show off, but his steady improvement and calm demeanor spoke for him. He still faced quiet judgment from some, but he no longer paid much attention. He understood that he could not control what others thought. He focused on what he could control: his actions and his efforts. At school, the teacher gave them a small quiz. Ethan answered the questions with care, making sure he understood each one. He remembered what he had studied and felt confident as he wrote his answers. When the teacher returned the graded quizzes, Ethan saw that he had done well. He felt pride inside, knowing that his hard work was paying off. He did not celebrate loudly or draw attention, but he allowed himself a small smile. At home, he shared the news with his mother. She smiled, pleased to see him succeeding. She said she always believed he was capable of good work, but now he had the chance to prove it. She encouraged him to keep going, to aim higher. Leo looked up to Ethan, asking questions about the quiz and trying to understand what it meant to do well in school. Ethan knew that life was still uncertain. They could face future hardships, and he might encounter new challenges as he grew older. But now he understood that even when life was tough, kindness and help could appear unexpectedly. He also learned that accepting help when it was given honestly did not make them weaker. It made them stronger, because it allowed them to move forward and break out of the cycle of constant crisis. He decided that whenever possible, he would try to help others as well. He might not have money to give, but he could offer his time or share knowledge. He could help Leo with reading, assist the librarian at school, or offer guidance to classmates who struggled. These small acts might not change the world, but they could make someone's day a bit easier. As the evening came to a close, Ethan sat at the table reviewing his notes for the next day's lessons. His mother prepared a simple meal, and Leo organized his school papers. The light in their home shone steadily, and they had enough supplies for now. They were far from wealthy, but they were stable and hopeful. Ethan focused on what lay ahead, determined to keep moving forward one step at a time. On the morning of a new school day, Ethan woke up and got dressed in his old uniform. He packed his books and the notebooks his family had purchased with Mr. Harris's help. He ate a decent breakfast. The kitchen was small and the stairs still creaked, but the atmosphere felt different now. It felt steady. He left the house, waving to his mother, and reminding Leo to focus on his assignments. Walking down the street, Ethan noticed a neighbor nodding at him. It was a small gesture, but it felt like acceptance. Ethan gave a polite nod back and continued on his way. At school, he went through his routine. He listened in class, took detailed notes, and asked a few questions when he needed clarification. He did not expect miracles, but he trusted that consistent effort would lead to more understanding over time. He felt no shame in raising his hand. If someone rolled their eyes or made a quiet remark, he ignored it. He focused on his own path. During lunch, he ate a simple meal and reviewed his notes. He felt calm and steady. He remembered how frightened he had been when he thought their electricity might be cut off. Now that fear had passed, and he was making the most of the present moment. After class, he stopped by the library as usual. The librarian noticed his improved focus and asked him how things were at home. Ethan said they were better now. The librarian smiled, pleased to see him doing well. She said that hard work often paid off, and that she hoped he would continue on this path. On his way home, Ethan decided to pass by Mr. Harris's house one last time before returning for the evening. He found the old man sitting on the porch, enjoying the warm air. Ethan walked up and thanked him again for his kindness. He described how the family's stability had allowed him and Leo to improve at school. He said that he felt more confident and capable now. Mr. Harris listened quietly and nodded. He said he was glad his small gift had helped. He encouraged Ethan to keep studying, to keep believing in himself, and to remember that simple acts of kindness could create lasting changes in people's lives. Ethan thanked him and said he would not forget this lesson. When Ethan arrived home, he saw that his mother had prepared a simple dinner. They sat together, and she asked about his day. Ethan explained what he had learned in class, and Leo added details about his assignments. Their mother listened carefully, then reminded them that their future depended on their efforts. She said she was proud of them both. Ethan helped clean up after dinner, then reviewed his notes again. He felt good about his progress and the direction of his life. He knew they were still not rich or even financially secure in the long term, but now they had a chance to think beyond immediate survival. He wondered if one day he might earn a scholarship or find a mentor who could guide him further. He did not know for sure, but he believed in the possibility. As he prepared for bed, Ethan thought about how much had changed since that day he decided to help Mr. Harris carry the heavy sofa upstairs. At the time, he had no idea that a simple act of kindness would lead to such a difference in their lives. He did not help expecting a reward, but the kindness returned to him unexpectedly. This taught him that good deeds sometimes created opportunities and hope. He also learned about balance. Accepting help did not mean losing dignity. In this case, it meant gaining stability to grow. He now had a better understanding of life's challenges. He saw that while they might face new struggles in the future, they had the strength and resources to face them more calmly. They could plan, work, and learn step by step. As Ethan lay in bed, he listened to the quiet sounds of his neighborhood. The lights were on and the fridge had food for tomorrow. His mother would go to work, and he and Leo would attend school. They would continue striving for something better. He felt ready for the challenges ahead. Ethan closed his eyes and rested, knowing that even though their journey was far from over, they had taken important steps forward. They had learned to accept help, to use it wisely, and to trust their ability to improve their circumstances. With patience and determination, he believed they would keep moving toward a brighter future.